This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment.
Welcome back to Weights and Wealth. It has been a bit of a hiatus for us, and I'm sure if you tuned into the bingo episode recently, you are aware of our circumstances here. Like it or not, we do have real lives to live, and sadly, the podcast kind of fell on the back burner for about a month or so.
But we are back, and we plan on being back every week.
We are so back. So, Ted, if you can, or Nick, I think you got the weights wisdom this week. So if you want to put that out there.
Weights wisdom is just to set your exercises up for success. If like a movement is particularly hard for you, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it. I know that deadlifts are a big one. And so if you're really tall and stiff and have trouble reaching the bar, you can do a trap bar or something similar, just so that you can still work like the muscle groups, but without, really risking any sort of injury.
Yeah. Some people are just, the way you're set up, you might not be meant to do a certain exercise a certain way. If
you're built like a meatball, like Sean, people might say you can't run, but he's proven people wrong.
I am actually pretty good at running, I will say. A new skill unlocked in 2025 was distance running. So we're looking to maintain that. So Ted, if we got this intro article here, which is a budget breakdown of a 25-year-old man who makes $100,000 a year. So this is actually pretty interesting because, at least for me, I'll see on Twitter, formerly known as X, it's it's a tweet format where it goes like please help me with my budget, like inflation is killing me, and it's like car insurance $300, rent $2,500, groceries $200, blah blah blah, random miscellaneous expenses, and then they'll always put in something ridiculous like, I don't know, like Lego sets $45,000. Please help me, I'm drowning, I don't know what to do. So let's see what an actual real one of these looks like. So
this article is funny. It's been making the rounds on social media, but it's actually from 2018, but it's a CNBC article. And the reason people have been kind of hammering it on social media is they're saying boomers and people writing on CNBC have no clue what they're talking about. They're so out of touch. So basically it's this 25-year-old that lives in Boston in 2018. He makes like $100,000, and there's a pie chart that goes through his spending basically. And so his typical monthly spending that CNBC puts up is $2,775. You may be thinking, oh, that's what my rent is. So that's pretty interesting. So we're just gonna break it down a little bit. Part of this is just the, ridiculous monthly spending that CNBC thought
was normal.
Have. Yeah, and thinks is normal.
Literally, the subtitle of this is budget breakdown of a 25-year-old who makes $100,000 a year and is excellent with money.
You can do it too. Probably not, but and then part of it is just the inflation that we've seen, especially during COVID. So the rent on this pie chart is $825. And I said, that's pretty interesting for Boston. I know that Boston has very high rents and is always up on those lists of highest rents for different cities. So I found the average monthly rent for Boston in 2025 for a one-bedroom, or the median monthly rent in Boston for 2025 one-bedroom apartment, $2,830, more than the entire monthly spending that CNBC put up for this guy. So that's pretty funny because it says his monthly spending is $2,775, yet the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment is more than that already. There are ways that we've talked about on the show that you can get that down, whether it's having a roommate and splitting the rent. Sean and I are both married. We could have roommates.
I split my rent 3 ways.
Another one, it had $130 on transportation. Maybe if he's taking the metro
that could
or
be
like
metro
the
if
T
he doesn't
in
have
Boston.
a car or something.
Yeah, it's possible. But more likely for your average person, the average used car, not a new car, but a used car payment nowadays is $520, and tack on another $172 for insurance. And once you start adding together that average or median rent and car payment and insurance, you get $3,522. So some of the other aspects of the pie chart are $400 a month for food. I know that Alex and I spend a lot more than that on food. Yeah. Meat is expensive. Eggs are expensive. You could eat rice and beans every day, but we care a little bit more about our health than that. So
I mean, not to like, really hammer the point home here, but you have even if you didn't increase anything else in the pie chart to typical numbers, you're still coming out at like $53.50 a month
instead of $2,775.
Yeah, and I mean, I just want to bring us back to this real quick. For some reason, he's donating $615 a month. I mean, it's great to be charitable, but I don't know what he's. I kind of want to scroll down.
There's no entertainment spending. No vacation. No
what
subscriptions.
Is this guy actually? I don't know. Very weird. I don't think it tells us exactly what he's donating to.
Yes, it did have a couple charities on there.
Yeah.
We'll post the article.
Yeah. We'll post the article. Be sure to check it out. I mean, it's from 2018, so wild to believe that it's 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. So have things actually gotten that bad, or is this, one dude just a total fluke? Who knows? Yeah,
I mean, things have definitely gotten worse with inflation just based off the rent number there that we saw. So.
Yeah, very true. Ted, you mentioned something earlier about, like a new sleep device that you got.
Yeah, so Nick just got an Apple Watch recently. Alex and I both have Oura rings that we use to track our sleep. Nick, what's your experience been with tracking your sleep with your Apple Watch?
I mean, it's like kind of fun, honestly. I mean, like I don't really know if I've gotten anything like tangible from it as how to improve my sleep. I did test it the other night. I had like 3 drinks Friday before I went to bed, and like it did say that my sleep was like a decent bit worse that night. Like my heart rate variability went way down.
Or up.
But I mean, that one's kind of obvious. So other than that, I mean, nothing really tangible, but like I hope to see that over time.
Yeah, with the Oura ring, I know I can add tags on it. So if there's something specific, whether that's alcohol is an easy one, or like caffeine before bed, or one that I added was when I use mouth tape. Like I can see the difference in my normal sleep versus when I use mouth tape, and my sleep is better. I get more deep sleep and REM sleep when I have the mouth tape on. So there are different things. I'm not sure about the Apple Watch, but with the Oura Ring in the app, you can do that, and it's cool to see. And then also Alex and I kind of compete to see who gets a better sleep score. She beats me almost every day.
What are your just out of curiosity, like what's your average REM deep sleep and then normal sleep?
Well, it depends on how much I sleep, really affects that. But on a night that I get a good amount of sleep, like 7 hours, I'll have like an hour 20 minutes to hour 40 minutes of REM. But then a lot of times if I'm only getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, it'll be like 30, 40 minutes of REM, and then it gets mad at me.
That's pretty interesting.
So
so the focus of this episode is interest rates and them decreasing, and then also what was it? Something lunges. Yeah, something else that can go low on, I guess that was our way of weaving these things together.
I think it was alliteration. Low interest rates and lunges. I think that was
okay, very nice. Well,
we're reaching.
Yeah. It's a bit much. I was just trying to pull up a mortgage calculator to kind of help us make our point here. But like when the Fed changes, the federal funds rate, that obviously trickles down to you, the consumer. None of us can actually go up as an individual citizen and be like, hey, Mr. Chairman, I would like to take out a mortgage from the Federal Reserve. That's not how it works. The big banks go in, they get loans essentially from the Federal Reserve, and then they turn around and they loan that money out to other banks, and then other banks loan that out to you. So you're getting kind of like, I don't know, 3 to 4 iterations of middlemen between you and the actual origin point of the money, which is why when they talk about the federal funds rate and then like your typical mortgage, there's usually a significant difference, a couple hundred basis points. Usually, it's like anywhere from 3 to 4% difference between what the actual funds rate is and what your typical American is going to be getting on their mortgage. So just as like a kind of bird's eye view here, asset classes that generally increase when interest, goes up. You got treasury bonds. You have gold. Sometimes due to the reasoning behind it, they generally say gold will go up when interest increases, because interest increases usually are a means to fight inflation, and gold is kind of an inflation hedge as well. Any type of bank equity, so the JP Morgan, stuff like that, those banks are going to be doing better because obviously they can charge more on their loans, which is their primary product. Floating rate bonds, dividend stocks, insurance companies, because they buy a lot of debt and stuff like that, which they're going to get a higher return because the federal funds rate is higher. Things that are generally going to decrease is going to be real estate, the tech sector, and long-term bonds, because obviously if you bought a long-term bond and now interest rates are higher, your bond that you bought a couple years ago at a lower interest rate is now worth even less.
Yeah, and Nick, maybe we should do an episode on yield curves at some point.
Yeah, okay. No, I think that would be great. But essentially, higher interest rates make borrowing more expensive. This benefits really only the lenders, because we operate in a debt-based economy. Everything from housing to groceries becomes more expensive because obviously, the logistics company is taking on capital debt. The grocer has capital debt. Even the farmers are subsisting off of, some type of loaned money. So when rates go up, everybody's expenses go up, and therefore you see that hitting your bottom line as the everyday consumer who is not a business owner. Mm-hmm. Modern monetary theorists will generally argue that, this kind of short-term increase in prices, which is supposed to suffocate demand, is ultimately good for the economy, because because they still believe that demand is the sole factor in currency and the actual purchasing power of that currency. But there's kind of some disagreement because, we have the Pew Center here talking about how real wages actually really just kind of don't change at all. So right here we have, as kind of the main point, real wages have the same purchasing power as 40 years ago. So it's not like you can get more, it's not like the inflation has actually slowed anything down. It's where you're still pretty much getting the same deal. It's not like this is actually changing things. So it's kind of tough, but and most wage increases have actually gone to the highest earners rather than the lower ones. I think it was an average a 15% increase cumulatively versus the bottom tier. Around 3%.
The Myth of Capitalism book club episode went through a lot of those statistics and was a really good insight into that, how income has shifted and how much has gone to the highest earners versus some of the lower earners in our economy.
Which is, it's not necessarily morally a bad thing. It's just kind of something that you should be aware of. It's if people are telling you that big GDP goes up is always a good thing, no, because it's quality of life is what matters for Americans. It's as a country, this is not just an economic zone. like we should be concerned about the welfare of every American and not just, making like us being number one in this, nationwide index. No, it's like, do people in Flint, Michigan, do they have clean water? And like, is there like the ability to have a job that you can actually put a roof over your own head? Like, is the American dream alive? I think we're seeing that more now, with a lot more like people talking about that. But I mean, for the past 2 decades, it was the only thing people cared about was, the GDP increasing.
Yeah. During COVID, people were freaking out about the interest rates going up because mortgages became a lot more expensive, even though now we're more in line with what an average interest rate would look like. We were just in a ZIRP or zero interest rate policy arena for about a decade. Nick, is there anything with taxes and interest rates, or are those two entirely disconnected areas?
I mean, they're not really related.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously your taxes will go down if you're spending more on interest in your business. And I mean, like the real purpose, like Sean said, of raising interest rates is to slow growth a little bit. So, I mean, from that perspective, then, companies won't be making as much money, won't be paying as much in tax, but that's really the only relation.
Yeah. Yeah. And then another thing with lowering interest rates is Sean was talking about how when the Fed lowers the interest rate, it then lowers the interest rates that the banks can borrow. But it doesn't always have a one-to-one correlation with your mortgage rate or your auto loans. It's like when the interest rates were being cut last year, the mortgage rate wasn't changing much, right? Even though the interest rate was going down from the Fed.
I mean, yeah, they're not directly related. From the way I understand is that mortgages are more based on the 10-year bond.
Okay.
Which, I mean, that's going to have some sort of correlation to the Fed's fund rate. But, it's not directly tied to the Fed's rate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I pulled it up here just to kind of help illustrate the point. We have a amortization calculator. And so let's say we have a $500,000 loan with a 30-year term. And I mean, what was would you say was a good interest rate you could get?
They were at 2. I think some people were getting it for 2.5% or 3%.
You talking about mortgages?
I mean,
yeah.
I think it's estimated right now that more than 50% of mortgages are under 5.
Yeah, but and
a lot of those are under 4.
That was from the zero interest rate policy, environment. So
yeah,
a good.
I'm not saying right
rate,
now.
A good mortgage rate. What are you saying? Last year?
I'm saying from the low,
Oh, 2% was common. Yeah.
Between
we'll say 2.5%. But we're just trying to illustrate a point here. So the total interest on that you would pay is $211,217.62.
Okay.
Right. So if you have that locked
6% rate for now.
Yeah, we'll put 6.5.
I think it's it's almost 7 now because I was quoted 6.8, I think.
Yeah, we'll put in 6.5 just as a thing. So remember, keep that in mind. $211,000 essentially. We'll round down a bit. Same loan, but just now it's 6.5% interest, which is kind of the standard, mortgage right now. $637,000. So it's it is a significant difference. You're paying 2 times the amount. So I think that alone is going to continue to really, really suffocate demand in the real estate market, because it's pretty hard to look at one of those calculators and actually look at the amortization schedule when you're going to sign up for one of those loans and be wow, I'm essentially paying 2 times for this house, or 3 times for this house, depending on the actual value. But
right. And then it's also kind of a supply issue too, because the people that have the 2.5% or 3% mortgages aren't going to want to sell. They get into a 6-point-something%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's going to have to slowly unravel, but it will.
Yeah. Rock in a hard place, whether it's people defaulting, who knows with, the crazy things going on with the federal government. I'm talking about, with all the cuts, who knows how many people are going to be out of work or have to move, because, maybe they were just a DC insider for the past 20 years and they have no other skill. and they have to move somewhere else.
Yeah, we're seeing that here already with the Doge cuts in DC. The market in DC is falling quite a bit, the housing market.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where it bottoms out. But I think that'll definitely change things.
Yeah. All right. Should we move on to lunges? I know we're on a tight time schedule here. What time is it?
5:23.
Okay. All right. So with lunges, usually when people try to progress on an exercise, they focus mainly on the sets, the reps, and the weight. Lunges are I guess, subset of exercise where we can really focus on the setup of the exercise for your progression rather than just the sets, reps, and weight. Lunges are a good example here because you got a unilateral lower body exercise and there's a lot of different ways to load it. One of the ways that you can try to progress with your lunges is by progressing through planes of movement. So I'm going to try, as I do this quickly, to mix the terminology that we would use in the field with also the terminology the average person can understand, so that when I say one word, people have an understanding. So sagittal plane, this would be moving like front and back, any kind of like a squat or a bench press. That's all sagittal plane. You're going forwards and backwards. So with the sagittal plane, you can progress by the way you load it and the setup. With the frontal plane, which is side to side, think lateral movement, even though it's the frontal plane, moving through the hips laterally to drive internal rotation is going to be a way that we can progress a lunge exercise. And then lastly, the last plane that you would want to progress through, or the most difficult, would be the transverse plane, which would be rotation. And the easiest way to do that is by how you hold the weight side to side.
Interesting.
So when we look at lunges, if you are a beginner, there's a couple different ways that we can go kind of easiest to hardest on this. So for a beginner, I guess I would say load the front leg is probably easiest, and loading the back leg is a higher difficulty. So from loading the front leg, 90% load on the front leg is going to look like a step up if you've got a box and you're doing a step up. And then as we move to a walking lunge, rear foot elevated split squat, going to be more like maybe 50%, and a split squat without any elevation. And then front leg elevated split squat, looking more like 40% probably load on that front leg, 60% on the back leg. If you struggle with dumping your body forward, or if your heels are coming up when you're doing lunges, one thing we can do with the load is we can change your center of mass depending on where we hold that load. So say you're doing Bulgarian split squats, maybe you're a beginner or maybe you're intermediate or advanced, but you're dumping your torso and your chest forward as you're doing those. Instead of holding the dumbbells down at your sides on that Bulgarian split squat, we can hold a medicine ball, or for more load, you could hold like a kettlebell in a goblet position like you would with a goblet squat in front of you. And holding that weight in front of you is going to shift your center of mass forward. And that is going to make you compensate by trying to shift your center of mass backward, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So when we do that, it will help prevent that dumping that you are doing with your torso.
What's wrong with dumping? Because I mean, like I see people talk about like a high bar squat, for example, or is it low bar squat, where like you kind of do have that forward dumping, quote unquote.
So those are two different things. So if we look at a low bar squat, you're going to put more emphasis on like the hips and the glutes, and you're going to have a greater angle at your hips. Whereas with a high bar squat, if you're more upright, you're going to load a little bit more into the quads and load a little bit more into the knees.
So you're saying it's a similar effect here?
Well, that's different than dumping. If we look at like dumping on a squat, if you see people kind of with their chest falling forward and then they're coming up and doing like a hinge as their chest is towards the ground, and you look at that and you see, oh, that's not the best form. That's putting a lot of tension on their low back.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between like dumping versus, oh, we're just changing the setup. We're loading it differently. That low bar loading, it's shifting the center of mass backwards compared to like a high bar or a front squat. And we're just targeting a greater angle at the hips, getting more glute involvement than like dumping is different. It's going to put a lot more strain on your low back and your erectors. You see like the difference there?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So something like a barbell loaded lunge, if you've got a barbell on your back, that is going to be the opposite of what we just talked about of loading with a medicine ball in front of you or a kettlebell in front of you. The barbell load is behind you, so it's going to push your center of mass backwards, and you're going to have to compensate by coming forwards with that. So a lot of people in today's day and age, with all the sitting we do, struggle with anterior pelvic tilt. That's where, if you've ever seen like the meme of lumbar lordosis, where someone's like butt is sticking up and their hips are down and they're like arching their back a lot of us kind of walk around like that because of all the sitting we do, and we just have poor posture. So if you struggle with anterior pelvic tilt and your low back is often very arched, having that load in front of you that's going to force you to bring your center of mass backwards is going to help you pull the rib cage down and get rid of that extension in your low back. So if you're struggling with low back issues, even though you might not think, hey, my lunges are affecting my low back, maybe they're not causing pain, well, it still might help you to bring your ribs down and get that pelvis tucked and go more into posterior pelvic tilt and rotate that pelvis back, and build strength that way, and using your core to help pull the rib cage down to the pelvis. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand what you're saying. You got anything else you want to talk about with?
Yes. So moving on, a lot of people are going to progress their lunge variations, say Bulgarian split squats. Nick, what weight dumbbells do you use for Bulgarian split squats?
So it's actually kind of funny that you bring up that dumping, because a guy just pointed that out to me like last week. So I'm about to go a lot lighter. I'm usually sitting around like 60 to 70.
Okay.
But I'll probably start using like 40s and just try to stay more upright.
Yeah. Or just start using a kettlebell or like a heavy dumbbell in front of you, loaded with a goblet, to prevent that dumping, because we're shifting the center of mass. But say you're using 60s or 70s, Nick. If we want to progress through our planes here, instead of just adding sets, reps, weight, and we want to use the lunge to increase performance more, something we can do is drop the weight and move up in the progression to a harder form of the exercise by allowing your hips to shift during the exercise. So normally you're probably keeping your hips in line as you're lunging forward and backwards. But so say your left leg is forward on the Bulgarian split squat or the lunge, you can actually have your hips shift out towards the right, and that will allow for more internal rotation in that back leg. And this is going to help increase performance. So as far as internal rotation goes, you've probably seen through lifting videos on Instagram or TikTok. I know, Sean, we're gonna try to keep this short. Sean's got to get out of here. He's got a meeting. But you've probably seen like external rotation is what you want. When you're setting up for your bench, you want to externally rotate those shoulders. People are always talking about external rotation, screwing those feet into the ground on your squat and externally rotating. Well, when we get to the bottom of the bench press and we're about to go back up, or the bottom of a squat and we're going to come back up, it's actually internal rotation that drives that movement back up. So if we're looking at performance, we also want to train that internal rotation to prevent injury and also get stronger in that change of direction and kind of explosive movement. So when it comes to internal rotation, the way we're going to train that with the lunge is by actually allowing that hip shift to happen and allowing, if your left leg is forward, allowing your hips to shift out to the right. And there's other things that you can do to allow for more internal rotation. Putting your front leg inside of your shoulder width, that's going to allow for more internal rotation as well, or lengthening your stride. But if you're like Nick and you're normally using 60-pound dumbbells for your Bulgarian split squat, you can try dropping it to 30-pound dumbbells and then allowing that hip shift to happen. Focus on moving your hips out to the right a little bit on that lunge or that split squat, and then you're going to be training more of that internal rotation. And then I guess just real quick on the transverse plane, we can do unilateral loads. So if you've ever seen someone do a B stance RDL where they're only holding one dumbbell, or like a Bulgarian split squat or a lunge where they're only holding one dumbbell, if we have our left foot forward and we hold a dumbbell in our right hand, that is a contralateral load. If we have our dumbbell in our left hand, the same foot that's forward, like our left foot forward, that would be an ipsilateral load, same side. So with a contralateral load, think opposite hand holding the weight as the forward leg. That can help to drive more internal rotation, and if we have the weight on the same side as our foot is forward, that will help with more external rotation. So if you're someone that doesn't ever train internal rotation, you can try lowering the weight and allowing your hips to shift as you do the movement. And then if you get the hang of that, increase the weight, you can then start training in the transverse plane with rotation, start training your obliques more, your quadratus lumborum and your low back out to the side. Train that more by holding the weight just in one hand, the opposite hand of your forward foot, if you want to train that internal rotation. And you can even allow that hand that's holding the weight, so say left foot forward, holding weight in the right hand, you can allow that right shoulder to come forward and have a little bit of twisting of the core, and that will help increase the internal rotation even more. And then you're also getting some rotation in the exercise there. So tried to push a lot there in 5 minutes. I probably wound up more like 10 minutes as I usually do. But we do have to get out of here because Sean has a meeting he has to get to. So we will see you guys next week. And let us know if there's any content you want. We got about 10 or 12 episodes planned right now. But as
also,
always,
any good ideas for episode 100?
Yes, we do
coming
have
up. It's coming up, big milestone.
We do have a plan for episode 100, but we're looking for ideas for an even better episode 100.
Yes, we're always open to suggestions.
All right, see you guys next week.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth, and don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.